like all in front of. I wish I had a blanket.
Why?
Then you wouldn't have to like look at the computer.
Where would you put the blanket?
On the other side, not over the camera.
So you'd like pay no attention to what is behind the blanket.
Behind the magic blanket. Nothing is there.
No. Out of sight, out of mind.
So since it's just us for now, is there anything that you specifically want to do?
A couple things. One, and the first one probably we can work on more tonight. It's knowing what scales to use with what chord progressions. Mm-hmm. So like how to be able, rather than just kind of like flailing around until I find the right note, knowing what scales, whether the pentatonic or major, on different keys.
Okay.
So that's a specific thing, and then kind of a non-specific thing that we could either talk about tonight or you could share in emails is like, just because one time you said you know how to practice, and that stuck with me. Like, what does that mean to know how to practice? And so some like guidelines of what you think knowing how to practice looks like, and how we could get better at that.
Great. Yeah, those are two great things to talk about.
Cool.
Let's start with the practice part, because that leads into the scales part. So what I mean by knowing how to practice is I was given by my teacher, Bob Hansman. I'm really lucky to have been given a system. And it's a system of learning all of that fundamental stuff, like the scales and the arpeggios and the basic theory, foundational theory, and technique that is necessary to be able to do whatever you want, and more so to be able to go in whatever direction you want. So I think of the way that I have learned to practice as like a training, where there's like certain routines and there are like certain approaches to the routine. So for instance, as an example, like scale practice has been like a really big part of my earlier training, and I still practice scales, because it never ends.
Right.
And even if I know the major scale, I'm still going to practice the major scale, because it's not about learning the notes. It's about using the scale as an opportunity to master, perfect, control your sound and control your expression. So to know the shape is only the first step. But then once you know the shape really well, which is why we would like practice and repeat it many times, you probably already know a lot of shapes really well. The next step would be to use that shape so you can like sort of turn off the part of your mind that needs to remember things, and then turn on the part of your mind that is now coordinating like emotions and feelings through the notes that you play and the way you use your fingers. Right. So so that being said, the system that was given to me was a set a set progression of scale exercises, a set progression of arpeggio exercises, a set progression of chordal exercises, and then certain concepts on improvising that have helped me. Like, it's interesting, like the movement game stuff that we've been doing. It's a really similar approach when it comes to like improvising and composing. Like, you learn how to play with yourself through music. You learn how to like engage your own inspiration through games, like improvisational games. And whenever you get bored, all you have to do is like challenge yourself in a different way. And that keeps you learning, and that keeps you like constantly improving. So does that answer your question about like how to practice?
Yes. And maybe in my mind, I extrapolated that into like specific techniques or structures that you bring into your practice. Like, I'm going to do this for this many minutes. I'm going to do this for this many minutes. And it would be really interesting to be able to take what you do as a professional musician and apply that to someone who might only have 20 minutes a day to practice instead of 4 hours or whatever.
Or like 10.
6, 10, yeah.
In the beginning.
Yeah, exactly.
That's true. And you know, like, and as a guitar teacher, I have found ways to like do that, like modify practice for different people and different people's schedules. But all I can really pass on is like the concepts, you know, and then it's really up to you, like how deep you're able to get into it, like A, interest wise, and B, time wise. So I can give you like the specific, and I'm actually starting to do that. So
I saw you sent out some exercises.
Exactly. So that is, you know, one of the systems. So if you're interested, I don't think it would, I think that could be a 20-minute practice for somebody. And then of course, like I would imagine that you would have time to do that 20 minutes a couple times a week, and then also like write songs and play around. And that I think would be a pretty sufficient way to get better and get deep into music without having to like devote professional music amount of time. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that could be like a good answer.
Okay.
So that stuff is online. I can show you sort of what it is if you feel like it. Did you look at it and did it make sense?
I just looked. It did make sense, but I haven't sat down with it. But it might be helpful for everyone to like actually see you demonstrate.
That's true. Yeah, good idea. So basically what that stuff is, it's a system of learning major scales in 5 most efficient positions. So like my teacher developed this system, you know, based on like the teachings of many other teachers. Like he didn't like make it up, but he basically just presented it in this way that I think it's like genius. Especially just because what it did to my playing. So, I mean, it was like it works. So the 5 positions, the way it works is you would learn like you would learn all keys in all of these 5 positions. So one position is C in C major scale. They're all going to be 2 octaves. So you probably know this one. 2, 4, 1, 2, 4, 1, 2.
Oh, then you go up.
Yeah, then you shift. Yeah, 1, 3. 1, 2. Right. So
why do you not go all the way up in that one position? Why do you shift?
It's magic. No, really, like it's because of how this particular position fits in with all the other 5 positions. It's like once you experience, so for like, yeah, you can just watch that. Another position is, that's C in 5th position. So you have part of that scale in here. The next one would be, so by learning those 3, you've learned to navigate the key of C from here to a little shift to here, and then a little shift to here. So by learning those, and then the last one is actually up here. And then 4, which is too high for us acousticy people. So to answer your question, the positions are designed to help you navigate throughout the entire neck within one key.
Okay.
So, and the fingerings are designed to do that too. So like, for instance, it's really important when you do this one, it's really important, rather than using the 4th finger and then sliding, you're doing 1, 3, shift. Because you're
shift to the first finger?
Yeah, shift to the first finger. So 1, 3, 1, 3. And this is designed to train you to switch positions most efficiently. Yeah, and that's actually a cool switch to just practice. Hello, Brad.
Hi.
Welcome.
Hi.
Yeah, and then going down 3, 1, 3, 1. Yeah. Okay, so then to like elaborate more on your previous question. So this would be a good opportunity to really work on our technique. So one of the things I see in your technique is, we talked about this maybe a little bit. It's like thumb lowering down on the neck. Brett, are you cool sitting on one of these?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Thanks.
To fill you in, there's going to be people, like other people coming in late and dropping in.
Okay.
And people are watching us.
Okay.
And yeah, they can't see you right now. And Ed was asking about the scale exercises that I posted. Yeah, and we're just talking about he was asking about like knowing how to practice, or like what type of practice brings you to the next level in the best way. And I was sharing that I've been given by my teacher, I've been giving like a very specific system on how to learn the fundamentals, and the scale positions that I posted is part of that system. So we were just kind of going over that. Yeah.
So he doesn't use, because way back when I learned this one, he doesn't use this one.
Okay, so it's not that he doesn't use it; it's that it's not in this system. So to give you perspective, like I did all the exercises in the system, and then I continued practicing major scales. Like, you know, there's another way to do it where you play. This is a fun thing to do. Like, let's say I'm going to play in the key of C, but I'm only going to play 2 notes per string. And I start as low as I can and go as high as I can. So the lowest note I can play in C, or to make this exercise work, will be F, G, and then my next note, A, B. I'll have to start up here to make it work. So let's say I go to G, A, B, C, D, D, right? Get stuck here. So there are different ways to play major scales. You can, and that's when you get into like the game part of the practice, and all of these different positions like this that a lot of people learn, which is probably the one you were referring to. Yeah. So basically, you can play C major scale in any position. You know, that's a C major scale, starting down there, C major scale. But the only reason I can decide to play C major scale in any position, you know, and shift around is because of these specific 5 positions that like give me landmarks on how to move around the fretboard. So yeah, so that being said, there's no like right way to do it. It's just that this is like one way to give yourself a landmark. Right. Yeah. Okay. Do you want to tune up?
Sure.
I got tuner.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah.
How important, like I've heard some people say it's really important to really know the fretboard, like know where all the notes are, and other people, if you know the positions and the scales, it's not that important. Do you have a thought on that?
Yeah. I mean, going back to your previous question of like, how do I know what scale to play, for instance, to me, the only way I feel comfortable when, like, when you say F and I can identify F notes, then I feel like I can like dance around. But if you say F and I have to count like, then I feel limited. Right. So important or not important, it's really based on like what you're wanting to do and have the capacity to do. So like, I don't think it's bad that people don't, you know, learn scales or don't learn notes, or I mean, or yeah, it depends on your goals. So what are your goals?
I would like to play. I would like to be able to play with people more easily. Yeah. Like that's one of the areas where I feel like I don't have the knowledge of the interactions between scales and chords and where to play on the fretboard. So I would like to be able to do that more easily. Yeah. So I would highly recommend the scale practice as like a routine. So yeah, you said you didn't look at did it make sense to you when you saw? Okay, great. So if it made sense to you, that's all that, you know, that'll be helpful. So what I would recommend to do is like learn 1 or 2 or however many positions you have time at a time. So like maybe take 1 week and do like 1 and then the next week do the other. And this is just to start with, to like get you starting with the orientation on the fretboard. So let's say we take that C position, we would do it nice and slow when you practice it.
seeing as you go. And then immediately go to the next key, C sharp. Right. And since you're going slow, you should have the space to be thinking C sharp, right? Like, these are C sharp notes. You're really just like ingraining that into your mental pathways. Going to D. You're like, key of D, right? And then if you have the capacity, beyond key of D, you're thinking 1, 2, 3rd, 4th, 5th. So you're thinking intervals as you go. Once you feel like you have the space to do that. 7th, 6th, 5th, 4th of D, 3rd of D, 2nd of D, root, right? So that is the way of practicing that I feel is really helpful. It's a little bit more, it's a little harder, it's more challenging because it really requires a lot of energy. And yet, if you do 20 minutes of that, like, you can get far, like, very quickly. Most people will learn shapes and they'll be like, grrr, grrr, and you can do that. And maybe some of us, I mean, I definitely did that for a while. And like, I'm sure you guys have explored, like, I'm just going to learn this shape.
Right.
And that's what people talk about, I think. Like, when you ask how important is it to know what scale you're playing or just learn the patterns, I think the people who are asking those questions are the people who are really just focusing on patterns and what are the right patterns and which patterns can I play to sound good. That's totally like a fine way to approach it. It doesn't interest me much. I'm more interested in, like, how does music work? I'm more just like fascinated by the language. And so this way of practicing, where you're like, I don't view this as practicing scales. I view this as practicing keys. Like, this is the key of C. This is the key of E flat. And so I'm associating these notes with key of E flat. And that way I'm becoming familiar with, like, this is my 3rd of E flat. This is my 5th of E flat. And I'm kind of like thinking in these more practical ways about what I'm playing, rather than like, I'm going to learn this pattern and I'm going to be really fast and I'm going to be able to memorize this pattern. Like, it's no longer about patterns. It's more about, like, what does a 3rd sound like? It's like an inquisitive way to play your scale.
Right.
And it's important to go slow, to give yourself like the time and space to be inquisitive with it. Because otherwise it's just like stressful.
Right.
Yeah. Making sense? Yeah. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So so that's how I would recommend practicing those scales. And like, even if you only get like one position, some of the people watching, I think, probably maybe like haven't even tried a major scale practice. So like, even taking one position for a couple of weeks, it's like, as long as it takes to just feel comfortable and be able to go slow with it. But 2-octave major scales, that's really helpful, rather than 1 octave, or rather than like, a lot of people will teach major scales like, I'm going to play C and then I'm just going to go as high and then go back down, you know, and not actually finishing on the 2nd octave. And I think that that does something bad to us, because it makes us associate a major scale in like a random kind of way. Partial, yeah. So it's nice to like hear the full range of like, this is what it means when you're in a key. Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. And then to apply that, so we were talking about like efficient ways to practice, and I was sharing that like there's the system. And so you would go through the system of like learning the positions and working on your technique, using the opportunity to also like really focus on making all of your notes as beautiful as possible and making your hand feel as like, you know, aligned as possible. And then it's the interaction with the scale. So it's like, how can I improvise within this scale? And then maybe even like playing by ear. So one thing I've done with like, you know, other students in other groups is playing on one string, which we might have experimented with at some point. So if I'm going to play a C major scale, C major notes, key of C major, but I'm going to choose a random string, G string, A. Like, maybe you guys can also with me just find C major notes on the G string, on the 3rd string.
Oh, but it's yeah, because we're gonna naturally want to do the G scale.
Yeah, I'll just play C chord for you. Yeah. And you can continue.
Was that minor or major? Was this?
That's your F natural, which is your fourth. So you
Okay.
want to hear an F sharp because you're hearing G major scale.
Right.
Which would be. Right. But we're not playing that scale.
Right.
So Brad, do you want guidance on how to find the right notes?
Sure.
Or what do you know about major scales?
You know, I studied music a while ago,
Yeah.
but I just mainly get into improvising a lot.
Yeah. So from your music practice, do you remember like the formula for creating a major scale, like whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half?
Yeah.
Okay. So you can use that as a way to find the right notes. Your C on the G, I can just give you a starting point. Your C is on the 5th fret.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So
The
if
5th
you just,
string.
5th,
5th fret. Yeah.
3rd string.
Yeah.
So whole, you can go up whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. Right. Another whole step.
Another one?
Yeah.
Ooh.
Okay, so try that again. Whole.
Okay.
And then a half. And there's your C again. Good. So here, I don't know if you've noticed this, but double dots means the octave from your open strings.
Oh,
Right.
nice. Okay.
So once you play your G here, you can just go back down the octave. Right. And then whole, whole, whole.
Sorry.
And then half. Back to C.
Okay.
So why don't you try that? Yeah, and you can try like bringing that down the octave after you hit the double dots. Yeah.
Okay.
So try, once you get to the double dots, go down the octave. Try that. So start from C. Now we're down the octave. Because you just played a G, so now we're going to play G down the octave.
Oh, okay.
G, A.
3rd string still. Okay.
B. And C. So that's completing the scale.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Cool.
Great. Any findings from exploring with that?
The single string?
Yeah.
Just that you can improvise on one string.
Yeah, exactly. That's always an option.
It's like, whoa, okay.
Yeah. So yeah, to go back to like the concept of how do you know what scale to play, I think like theory really does help, like when you know what the chords are. So when I'm improvising with someone, and they're just playing something random, the first thing I do is figure out what key are they in. And whatever key they're in is my major scale. And like I said, I don't think of major scale as like my scale or my position. I think of it as my key. So that means like if the person plays a random chord and it happens to be like A flat or something, I'm like, okay, key of A flat. Now, even if that means they're in F minor, or they're playing other chords that are in the key of A flat, like maybe they're playing a B flat minor 7 and a D flat minor 7. Maybe that's the chord progression. That's still key of A flat for me because of knowledge of theory, which we can go over like how to figure that out. So that being said, I will mess around with A flat notes and see what sounds good. I'm just thinking like A flat. and my decisions are like, do I want to go higher or lower? Like, what kinds of melodies do I want to make within the key of A flat? That's like my first step before I get into anything like, you know, anything more complicated, you know. Make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'd probably try and make it too complicated because I'm thinking like, what's the relative minor?
Right. Playing
that scale versus a major scale.
Yeah.
And like things like that.
Totally. And that is my my beef with music teaching these days is many people are teaching like modes. Right. And all of these, like and even pentatonic scales kind of, I mean, a lot of my students know this, like it's really sad for me that like everyone learns a pentatonic scale before they learn a major scale, because the pentatonic scale is derived from the major scale. So how does that make any sense? It just makes it more confusing. Mm-hmm. And I've had like many a confused person be like, I don't get it. There's all these different patterns. What do I do? Now, if you just learn a major scale really well, you don't need to learn anything else.
The pentatonics in there, you can just play the notes.
All you have to do is take out notes. And same with the modes. If you like in that example, you know, my chord progression is B flat and D flat, B flat minor and D flat major. So somebody could say, all right, I have to play a B flat minor pentatonic or a B flat Dorian and then a D flat Lydian. These are modes, right? The other option is like play in the key of A flat. Hey, Ferran, come on in.
Good to see you again.
Do you wanna, if you want to, you can grab the guitar. Yeah. Yeah. So that being said, I think that'll make your life a lot easier if you just start the practice of major scales and then learn how to associate when someone's playing like relative minor and da-da-da-da. Just figure out the major key center and take it from there. Use your ear. You know.
Hey.
Brad, this is Ferran.
Hi. Nice to meet you.
Yeah. To fill you in, we're talking about major scales, of course.
So boring.
I know. So boring.
Okay.
And we're talking about how to use them and how all scales are pretty much derived from the major scale. So practicing a major scale is not really like practicing a pattern or a scale. It's more like practicing a key center. So Ed's talking about like how do I know like what scales to play when I want to improvise.
Yeah.
And so I'm saying like the first step that I do is like I just figure out what the key center is and then take it from there. Here you go. Oh, you got.
You have a peek? I'm getting into the peek.
Can we borrow?
If not, it's fine.
I might have one.
Yeah. Go ahead. I hardly ever use them. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
So you first think about the there's one.
Yeah, there's one there.
Yeah, you said it. Who is more retarded?
No.
So you first think about the
key center.
Key center.
So like whatever the chords are, based on like knowledge of you know, chordal harmony.
So like for me to understand, like if you want to play, for example, the Doric scale. Dorian scale.
Yeah.
and it's like D Dorian. You think where is your C?
Yeah.
That's like your key center?
I just like don't even think D Dorian. And like I don't even have to make that step. Because like
you stay in C.
You just stay in C.
And then what do you think after that?
And then I think chord tones. So that's like the next step. So if I want to really like spell out a chord, you have your key center, which is like the scale that's going to work over all the chords or most of the chords. And then if you want to like really make a distinction between one chord and the other, you focus on making your melodies land on roots, thirds, fifths, and sevenths.
Depending on what chord is being played.
Well, always a root, third, fifth, and seventh.
Oh my God.
Of whatever chord is being.
Yes,
gotcha.
Exactly, in time.
And in most, not jazz and stuff, but in most songs, all the chords are going to be in the same key.
I wouldn't say most, maybe most.
Like popular songs, most of the chords.
There's some common key changes that happen.
Yeah.
So, and that's another thing that like as we go, we can start to analyze songs, and you'll see that there are key changes that will be more common than others.
I would love that work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that being said, like, you know.
So like if a bridge goes from major and then goes to minor, is that a key change, or is that minor chord still in the key?
You mean the same chord, major to minor?
No, just like going to a major chord in that chord progression.
Yeah, you'd have to give me an example, because sometimes major chords can go to other minor chords and they're in the same key, and sometimes they're not, depending on what they are and how they relate to each other. So maybe a great like way to engage in this group that we're starting is like we can start to share songs. Like if you're listening to a song and you're like, okay, what key is this in? Or, try to like really analyze, maybe it's a song you play, and, try to figure out like what is the key center. And if there's like a question chord like that, then you can, share with us and we can look at it. Cause it's really that kind of like knowledge and intuition comes from just like analyzing a bunch of songs. Yeah. And then this stuff is like pretty easy to identify as if you're like reading it, like it becomes a language that you can just read when you hear it.
And what if the song is actually in a minor key?
Okay, so yeah, I still think major key center.
You do?
I do. But that doesn't mean that like I'm not aware that it's a minor sound or a minor
But
key.
you're not playing the major scale over the minor.
So here's the thing, I am, because I don't practice scales, I practice keys.
Uh-huh.
So when I'm practicing the major scale, I'm like C major scale, 2-octave C major scale is just a way to practice. Well, it's just a way to practice the key of C. So whatever chord is in the key of C, like D minor, A minor, G, F, any of these chords, I can play within the key of C. The miscommunication or misinterpretation of what I'm saying could be like, okay, great. Now, like at whatever chord you're playing, I'm just going to like meander my way around C major scale. That's not quite how it works. And that's when the chord tone knowledge comes in. But that's the first step, like for me, even now, is like knowing that my available notes are within like a certain key center. So that's, yeah.
So if a song was in E minor, what major key would you look for?
Yeah, well, relative major of E minor is G, right?
Right.
Now, the other misinterpretation is like, what does a song being in E minor mean? So you have to look at what the other chords are to really distinguish like because maybe E minor is not the relative minor of the key you're in. Maybe E minor is like the Dorian mode, based on what the other chords are. So that's the other thing to pay attention to when you're like listening to songs and analyzing them. And that's why I really do encourage all of us to be like posting songs and being like, let's figure out what key this is in, because there are a lot of different examples. Like if it's a minor chord, it's not necessarily going to be the relative minor. A very common progression in the music that we all listen to, like, from the circles and stuff, will be like, if it's E minor and D, right? Like that happens a lot. Or in a key that we're more familiar with, it would be like A minor and G. Like for those like ukulele players, like that progression is in a lot of songs, right? And that doesn't mean that it's in the key of C. It could be in the key of G, because A minor could be the 2 chord and G could be the 1 chord.
And when would it actually be in A minor?
It depends on the song, and it depends what the melody is, and it depends what else is going on. So those are the kinds of things we become familiar with the more we hear the sounds connected to these like concepts. Yeah.
What kind of, so first the key, you said, then the chord tones?
Yeah.
And that's what changed depending on what's really the key, or what really the scale that you want to play. Like the shape of the scale is the same, but the chord tones are the ones that change.
Yeah, so don't confuse shape of the scale. So another thing we talked about earlier is like I don't know if you saw, maybe you didn't see because you just signed up, but like I posted the 5 major scale positions. Oh, we did them in class. Okay. 5 major scale positions, and they like travel all around the neck. So if I want to play in C, I have this option, and then I also have this option going down here, and then I have this option, and then I have that option, right? So so practicing scales is not like a shape. It becomes more like C major is wherever
like
I want it to be.
Itinerary. kind of?
A what?
Like
Itinerary?
like practicing or like a path?
Yeah,
You know what I'm
path,
saying?
exactly, like a route, you know. And so that's when you practice them all and you like memorize them all and spend time with them all, it becomes like I can just navigate my way, you know, through C in all these different ways. So that being said, then when the chord tones come into play, you're navigating through that scale as a basis, and then you're accentuating. So let's say my A minor and G, you know, because we like those chords a lot. So what's the song that does this? Like Pachamama, right? Right, and then that goes to E minor. So in this case, it's in G. So Pachamama is like key center in G. So you could, right? You wouldn't land on G on the A minor chord because it would sound like a G major scale, right? So. Right. So I'm landing on, I'm playing within the key center of G, but I'm landing on third, fifth, root third or fifth of A minor when it comes to A minor, or root third or fifth when it comes to G. And those notes are changing.
So, and how you get there to know with such a clarity, like, okay, this is the note that I wanted to hear.
Yeah, these shapes really help. So like practicing those major scales first so that you can navigate yourself through the key. And then the next step after that will be the arpeggios, which is a whole other practice. I don't even want to like necessarily show them to you because I feel like, yeah, we'll do them later. You know?
Yeah. But you do the arpeggios out of the key. Do you practice like the arpeggios of Mi minor on the? Yeah, right.
You practice all keys, all qualities.
So like you practice the arpeggios, for example, of the Dorian scale.
So arpeggios aren't related to modes. Arpeggios are related to chords. So there's like C major 7,
Okay.
and then C dominant 7, whole other sound. C minor 7, C minor major 7,
Minor major?
minor third major 7th. All the combinations of.
But this one would be the. I don't know.
Well, hold on, just like to answer his question, all the combinations of root 3, 5, and 7, like the thirds and the fifths and the sevens can be altered either flat or sharp. All combinations are an arpeggio of some sort.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So in that A minor G progression, you said you were landing on the third, fifth, and the root third, fifth of the A minor.
When it comes to A minor.
But are you're landing on the minor third?
Yeah.
Okay. But that's not the note that's in the G major scale, is it?
It sure is.
It is?
Yeah, because that's how chords within a scale work. So that's a major third.
But isn't
There's
that
your minor third. And that's
gotcha. All right, makes sense.
Yeah. Did you have a question before?
No, I mean, like chords are related to modes in a way. They can be. That you said like arpeggios aren't related to modes, are related to chords, but then the chords are related to modes.
So one thing we were talking about before is my philosophy, or that has been, that I've like developed through studying with my teacher, is like modes are great and helpful, but you don't, if you know the major scale really well, and if you know the chord qualities really well, you don't really need to know modes. It's only helpful to know what they are because people talk about them, but you don't need to learn mode patterns.
Okay. It's the arpeggio of each chord.
Chord tones. Like chord tones, simple as that. So like knowing that like on A minor, the C is the third. So I can play within my major scale, but land on C when I'm on A minor. So that's another way to think about it without learning arpeggio positions is So here's the game. Let's play this game. I'm going to play A minor and G, and we're just going to play within a major scale, but when it comes to A minor, you have to play a C. And when and when it comes
That's
to the minor third of A minor, and when it comes to G, you have to play a B.
B, which is the third of G.
Okay, so we can do like maybe 4 bars of trading. I'll play the chords, and do you want to?
Okay.
I'm not ready for that. But I'll watch carefully.
Well, I can get you ready for that really quickly. So, do you know any majors? Can you play any type of G major scale?
No.
Not at all. Okay, cool. So I'll show you one real quick. G.
You're on third?
Third string.
Yeah.
That's your G, right?
Okay.
So G, A, B,
Yeah.
C, D. So even just working with those notes.
Okay.
So
Nope.
right. Just stay with those notes.
Okay.
And again. Again.
I keep doing that, sorry.
It's okay. It's all learning. Again. Yeah. Now say with me. G. G. Can you say it with me?
G.
G. A.
A.
B.
B.
C.
C. C.
D. One more time.
G.
A.
A.
B.
B.
C.
C.
That's it. Cool. So work on that.
Okay.
We're gonna do the trading,
Yeah.
and then we'll come to you after a couple of times.
Okay.
But like really try to get that. So
I will.
if you want to remember with the frets, 0, 2, 4, 5, 7, right?
Okay.
0, 2, 4, 5, 7. Okay. So
What do we think about?
So you're thinking
Like
about
this
playing,
one?
No, because you can think about that C when it comes to A minor, and then B when it comes to. It doesn't matter whether it's this one or this one or this one or this one or this one.
Okay, you're gonna play which chords?
A minor and G. I'll do it
And
slow.
G.
Yeah.
Okay, so we sing in C when you're playing A minor?
No.
I know.
You're thinking within the key of G major
All the time.
the whole time.
Okay.
But the catch is that when we're playing a minor chord, you have to play a C, just the
Okay.
note.
Okay.
Yeah. And when we're in the key of G, you have to play a B.
Okay. And the relationship with. Okay. Okay. Cool. Because you play a minor as the second grade of G,
Second chord. Yeah, the true chord.
not as relative minor.
Exactly, and that's kind of what we're talking about. Is how to identify keys.
Yeah, that's why I was like, okay.
Do you know A minor and G chord?
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe play the chords with me. Yeah.
Nope.
Okay, so we'll just start with a. Do you want to go first, Ed?
Sure.
Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. G. Is that too fast? Good. Cool, yeah, nice. And then one question about that. So I heard the C and the B like consistently, which is awesome. Were you able to also visualize G scale around that?
Well, kind of.
Kind of, right? Because it seemed like sometimes you were
Not quite there.
you were playing notes around the C and the B by ear. So the next step for you would be to do that exercise. You can do it at home, but see if you can like make larger jumps that are within the scale. So like, right? So
Right.
it's not just like step by step, it's more like what's in the scale that's available right there.
And that's where I think the arpeg, where you're doing the fourths and the scales by the fourths and the fifths.
Well, just practicing the scale
Uh-huh.
is going to give you, because once you learn the pattern, you're going to start to be able to see the pattern like an imprint without it being step by step. So you just see the available notes. And this comes with, you know, consistent.
10 hours of practice a day.
No, it comes with 20 minutes a day on a consistent basis.
20 years.
I mean, it helps.
Yeah.
20 years, 10 hours, yes. But, you know, I truly believe that if you practice with a lot of awareness and a lot of focus, you can get there pretty fast. So, Ferran, you want to try?
Yeah, so it's a C when you play minor, and when you play the G, a B?
Yeah. And then around
Okay.
that, G major scale.
Okay.
1, 2,
And you,
3, 4.
cover
G
my
major
mistake.
scale. That's right. Okay, so notice tendency happened a couple times. I'm just pointing it out. Tendency to play
Yeah.
C sharp, right?
Yeah, because I don't know where I am. I'm like, okay.
Right. Well, that's what
Yeah.
we're training. Hi, Laura.
Should I get mine?
Hey.
Yeah.
I didn't know
What do you think
we would
this
be
is?
doing. I had no idea. I'll be back in a second.
Are you going to art space?
No.
Oh, okay.
But do you need something there?
Well, no, I was just gonna offer you. You can grab the cushion from the little chair that's out in the lobby.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Yeah, excellent.
awesome.
Is there a bathroom over there?
Yes, there's a key hanging in the lobby. Do you guys need a?
I'll show you.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Does anyone need like a break?
Hey.
A couple minutes? Or?
If you want to take a
I
break.
just got here.
I'm fine.
Do you want?
No, I'm good. I'm just. Okay.
Is my foot in the picture?
I don't know. Let's find out. Is Ed's foot in the? Yeah, a little bit.
Hi.
Who is there?
How are ya?
Well, it's not like Facebook Live. It's like I'm gonna post it after we're done. But there's Steven and Christina watching, and a couple of other people. Who else is there? Doug is there.
Ah, right.
Ryan is there.
Ah, cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. That's happens usually when I start playing. I kind of like get distracted, and it's good in a way because it forced me to go through my ear, and I like that.
No, but yes.
But
But we know how to do that already. So when we're practicing,
okay.
when we're training, we're training.
Ah,
When we're playing by ear, we're playing by ear. So what I
okay.
can help
Be
you
aware
with,
of what you're doing.
because like
Yeah.
playing by ear is something that you'll always be able to do. So
Okay.
so we're practicing like limitations so that when we go out to play and improvise, we feel free because we know how to work within
Totally.
limitations
Yeah.
and right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So any questions on that so far from you guys?
No. Like, I mean, I guess you already mentioned, but what's like an appropriate way to work on it?
Right. Like the 5 major scale positions is the place to start. And you know what I mean, right? Like when I say that, so
Yeah, I had 4 though.
you got 4. I'll give you the 5th one. The
Okay.
5th one is like an arbitrary one. I posted it.
It's there.
Yeah, it's there. So now you have it. But it's one that helps, but it's not necessary. The 4 ones are like the 4. The first 4 are like the most important. 5th one is nice to
Okay.
know. Yeah. Okay, you guys want to keep doing this?
Mhm.
Okay. So G major scale. Ed, you want to go?
Sure.
Or actually, like, while we're doing this, why don't you guys practice trading 4s or trading 8s? Trading 8s, which means 8 bars.
Ah, okay.
Right. So
Yeah.
so when you can start playing chords, Ed will solo for like 8 bars,
Mhm.
and then you guys switch. And then you play chords and you solo.
Okay. So you are playing with English, 2 measures of each chord, or
Yeah.
4?
1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4. And so you get 2 cycles of that. Then you guys switch roles after this. Now switch.
Okay.
You came all prepared with your yoga mat and everything.
I mean, I have it's all in my car, so.
C sharp. If you have questions, just like speak up.
Yeah, I don't know any of this.
It's good that you're coming.
Me too.
Okay, so yeah, no, that's great. That's awesome. It's really fun to trade. Like whenever you guys have an opportunity to play with someone, even if you're just like rehearsing or practicing, I highly recommend being like, hey, let's trade. Even if it's just a jam situation and there's no like limitation, but that's a really fun way to get used to like communicating with each other. It's a good like also opener if you're jamming with someone new. Like let's trade. Let's like have a conversation. So it's a fun thing to do.
Yeah.
So I want to address that. Lauren was like, I don't know what you're talking about. And so I want to like sort of maybe shift and see if these guys have any questions, because I know that like a lot of other people are watching that haven't really done this kind of practice before. And maybe while we cover some other stuff, if you guys want to like go in there or go out there and continue like trading and continue that practice.
Well, it depends on what you guys are going to talk about.
Okay, so why don't you stay and then feel free to go out and jam.
All right.
Okay. So
we'll have a signal like.
It's time.
So subtle.
Gotta go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
Be back in an hour.
Be back never. Yeah. So since like, do you guys have any specific questions that you came here wanting to decode? No.
How do I get better?
How do I get better at music? Do you have any specific questions?
Well, what you were describing earlier as far as learning the whole key. When I played tenor saxophone, I used to solo a lot, and my teacher talked about this open note theory, where I would just see what was available to me for in the whole song. Like as the chords changed and everything, I had like a foundation.
Like see like what note was consistently going to be okay.
Yeah. So I had like a through line for the song as like a reference. Is that similar to what you're talking about?
Yeah, except the way I'm talking about it is like maybe more of like it's yeah, it's more of like an explanation of why that would be. So the way I'm talking, so that open note would be like the key center. So like, let's say you have a song and the open note that you find is like G, and maybe the song's in the key of G, and that's why it works. So yeah, similar.
Okay.
And then further, like once you would find that open note, then you identify, okay, this song's in the key of G, then you can start to use your knowledge of G major scale and start to play the other notes that exist in the G major scale to, you know, and most likely a lot of them will sound good in most places. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and feel free if there's like anything you want to talk about that's like not related to scales, like if it's like picking or strumming or songwriting or anything else, feel free. Like we got started on this just because, you know, we did, but we don't have to only do that today.
Because I was the only one here on this journey.
Yeah.
That's why we got started.
Yeah, it's all Ed's fault.
I got to pick because I was here on time.
Oh.
But now we can all pick.
How many people are watching?
Well, it's I'm posting it after we're done.
Oh, so it's not live.
It's live streamed, but it's not like interactive.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
It could be though, because you're doing Hangouts, right?
It's
So
Hangouts. I
you
don't
could
really know how
invite
this stuff
people.
works. Truth be told.
Yeah. You can totally just do an open Hangout.
Oh, that's what I should have done.
Or you could just do Zoom.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
it's
Is
a
Zoom
trendy
free?
thing now. No?
It can
is.
be.
Zoom. Okay.
Next time.
Next time we will do Zoom E or something.
So, to Lauren's thing about how to get better, I mean,
Yeah.
maybe just some. I mean, it sounds like a silly question, but it's not. Like just some basic musical concept, musicality,
Yeah.
technique.
Good question. Yeah.
Things that like could make us all better.
Thank you. Yeah.
What I notice is that when anyone starts speaking music jargon or theory, my brain just powers down.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's going to be really hard then to get better at music.
I'm good at like hearing.
Well, I think there's my observation is that there are people who learn music through theory, and there are people who learn music through ear.
Totally.
And just because your brain turns off when it comes to theory doesn't mean you can't get better. You can't get better in your system potentially if you're not willing to at least push through that. But it's not going to make or break your ability to be a good musician.
Totally. And I don't exactly. And like that, I don't think there is only one way. But when I hear music jargon, I don't think theory necessarily, because I can talk to you all day about music without talking about theory.
Mm-hmm.
But so if your brain is shutting off just at music jargon in general, like if we're talking about chords, melody, harmony, composition, and that doesn't, and that's like, those are scary concepts, then let's like redefine what those are, because they shouldn't be scary because you deal with them every day.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You are like living with those things. So are those words scary?
Not those words.
Okay. So things like scales are scary.
I mean, if you said like what notes are in the G scale, I could play it on the piano, but I'd have to think about a keyboard.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So right, and that's totally fine. There are a lot of guitar players or other instrumentalists that think keyboard in order to find notes, and like we've done the one string improvising thing, like you do a lot of that, and so that's one way to like bring the keyboard mind into the guitar, and that's totally valid. The next step after that would be to do the imagine that this is, if you're playing guitar, if you're playing uke, it's 4. If you're playing guitar, imagine that these are 6 little pianos.
Oh, so many pianos.
Right. And so you just get to like play, you just get to play piano in different places, but in 6 different, one by one. So you can do your like 1 string exercise, but shift that into 2 or 3 strings and eventually all the strings, but you're still thinking linearly like that. So that's another way to approach playing within a key that's not going to be about like patterns.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. I'm also just here to like soak up what I can soak up.
Yeah. But yeah, cool. Great. Yeah, let's see.
But
But
I like that.
Wait,
You're
I'm
playing
doing
the
it.
piano.
Uh-huh.
Have you seen the people who play their guitar like
Yes.
that?
I've tapping, like,
Uh-huh.
I feel like I could be really good at that.
I think you could just just like find a really cool open tuning on your guitar
Right.
and start tapping it. I bet you'd come up with something cool. Probably, yeah. But I do like your question of like what are general music things that will help you get better, and like system of scales and arpeggios and all that. I think that's only relevant if you're interested in improvising.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really think that's relevant if you're interested in like even writing songs necessarily.
Right.
So so like ways to get better at music in general, like the first thing that comes to mind is like slow down your practice and make your practice more. This is for you.
It's the key.
Yeah.
Well, it's for me especially, but yeah, it's a big secret.
It's
So
a really
obvious.
helpful thing to think about, to make your practice more of like a meditative like experience rather than like something I have to do, like I have to learn this. So a lot of us get into the mode of like creative. This is awesome. This should always be in your practice of like creative. I'm going to learn a song, or I'm going to write a song, and I think sometimes we can get stuck in like, okay, I'm learning songs and I'm writing lots of songs, but they're all kind of like within the same language. And so how do I expand my language? Right. And so this sort of approach of slowing down the practice is a really helpful way to expand that language. And one, just to give you an example of what I mean by that, it would be like we were just playing the chords A minor and G, like, because we were talking about like maybe like Pachamama would be a good example of, we were talking about something to do with key centers. So let's just take those chords again. And like, let's say you already know these chords, which I think most of us do. So maybe a typical way that we would always play it is like our strumming pattern. And that's the thing that we're trying to break out of. So to slow down a practice would be to approach it from like a more inquisitive kind of way. Like, how can I play these? Like, my mind just went to like, what's a different style that I could play these chords? And like, maybe I like it and maybe I don't. It doesn't really matter, but it's really about exploring if there's something different that I can do, like re-patterning. Right. So I have a couple, just in that little like mini jam session, I have a few things that I was thinking about. So like I was trying all these different ideas as we were going. So every time we went through a cycle, I had like a different like concept that I wanted to try. And I'm wondering, did anyone else? Yeah. So like, can we share some of those concepts? Like, did you have?
Mm-hmm. I was like.
Nice.
I was just doing a bunch of different things.
Like based on that idea. Awesome.
Yeah.
Any other ideas that like came up just through that?
Different bass, like.
Right.
And then.
Right.
So just playing with different patterns and different hammers and
Nice. Okay, cool. Yeah. So like just to sort of ground what this all means. Like, so your approach was like, I'm going to play like the A minor that I kind of know, but I'm not going to play all the notes. And then for the G, I'm going to go up high. So like, let's say that that's a way to communicate an idea. And then a way to communicate your idea, like your first one was, I'm going to make it really bass heavy. That would be like the main essence of that first idea. And then the second idea was like, I'm going to add in some melodic flourish. Essence. So like giving you examples on how to play with it. They can be like very broad variations. So did anyone else have like ideas that were pretty solidly.
I didn't do it, but I was thinking, I didn't know what noise were you, what sound were you doing? And I was thinking like maybe play these two and then these two, and then they alternate also, but I haven't done it. It just crossed my mind.
So like as an example on how to like, for me, that idea was not about like the specific notes I played, but the idea was I'm playing 2 strings at a time. That's the only like task, right? So that's a thing that you can play with. Like I'm just gonna play 2 strings at a time. It doesn't matter the rhythm. It doesn't matter what notes. It doesn't matter which strings, but I'm just committing to 2 strings at a time. So this is a way to like engage yourself in like a different way of playing the information you already know. Yeah, I'm gonna play in different styles, like different rhythms. Yeah. So let's do that little jam again, and we'll just like repeat those 2 chords, and we'll see if we can like come up with at least 1 or 2 like really solid ideas that we can then communicate afterwards. Yeah. Okay. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, let's do it. So we're doing A minor and G, right?
Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4. It's fun to just like all play guitars together.
And ukes.
And ukes, yes. Well, it's like a type of
It's
guitar.
like a little guitar.
Yeah. Anyone want to share some of the ideas that came up?
You go.
Okay. Well, I don't know if it'll sound good without the guitar because I was kind of counterplaying your stuff.
Okay, you want to do it together?
Yeah.
2, 3, 4. Great. So how would you communicate that idea? As an exercise.
Playing the 5th fret hard, and then I'm playing the 1st string on the 7th fret, like with the 8th flurled. I have no idea.
So
Flurled?
Like this is a floral.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
This is why I'm a music teacher, Ed.
Floral. I really like that word, actually.
I do too.
Floral.
I'm
Some
gonna
people
start
floral, I
fluraling my
speak
8th fret more often.
You should just like add a little more floral to your.
That's like what it sounds like when I ask musicians to do things. They're like, don't quite understand, but I think I know what you mean.
Yeah, totally. I get floral. yeah, I just want to like offer a different way to think about music.
Please.
As long as her brain doesn't turn off.
No, yeah.
So how would you describe that?
Right. So you actually described it to me in a very technical way. So so what I'm going for, and when I'm talking about like thinking of ideas, is more like conceptual ways to think about our ideas. So rather than like I'm playing this note and this note and this note, it's like maybe you're finding like you played like a pretty heavy chord for A minor, and then you played a melodic embellishment for the G. So
melodic embellishment equals floral.
yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
But I guess like what I'm getting at is like there's kind of a contrast between like a heavy and then like a higher light, right? So you're playing with like a contrast rather than like a certain kind of rhythm or rather than a certain kind of a certain kind of like conceptual mathematical thing, you know?
Cool.
So like the 2-string would be like maybe like a mathematical game. And then there's like I'm gonna play strum in this way, but like what you're doing is you're doing like a sort of contrast thing, like heavy, like low, high, you know. So those are the kinds of things I'm like inviting us to think about when we explore playing in different ways. Is like actually like to challenge ourselves to use those words to ourselves, like what does floral mean? Like how many ways can I floral? You know, like yeah. Okay. So like the things that you would say to your musicians, like try them on yourself. Like can I floral more? You know, or what does a twirl sound like? And we can actually do some of these improvisational games. It's reminding me of some really fun things we could do after this. But does that make sense? Like okay, cool. So any other ideas that people want to share?
You had a good one.
Yeah.
It's not really solid, but
Cool. So how would you communicate that idea?
Floral?
It's like kind of like the opposite of mine, right?
Well, in the sense that it's supportive. It's like a supportive role, and yours was more of a flirty role.
Yeah, but his first one was more of a melodic embellishment, and then he went down to more of a chord heavy with the G.
Yeah. So, right.
Exactly.
So yours is very like full. So like your idea, the thing,
See, I would consider this would be full to me. I mean, I guess it's full in that all the notes are in there.
All the notes and all the rhythms are being played like don't ga da 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 da. Right. It's not sparse. It's not. It's melodic, but you have the melody on top of the picking in between notes and the bass going on.
Right.
So there are several parts going on in that part.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Got it. Yeah.
So yeah, full supportive. So that's your idea that you're playing with. Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. Do you have another? Did anything else come up that?
There were other things, but I don't really. I was doing.
I guess what I'm interested in, like, what I'm like trying to conjure, is, and you don't like, not examples that you would have to show me exactly what you played, but more like, what is the essence of what you were going for? So, yeah. So for your example, it would have been like, well, I was going for like a heavy A minor with like a lighter, more sparkly G, and yours is like I was going for a supportive, like very busy like part.
Yeah, that's kind of like Lauren. That's not how my brain works. It's like I'll just noodle. Like I'll do something like that, and when I hear something that I like, it's like I feel it, but I don't necessarily have words for it.
Totally, and this is all the only reason we're doing this is because we're talking about ways to break ourselves out of our patterns, ways to break ourselves out of our regular box of like, I'm just gonna like mess around with this song. And one way to do that is to use, like imagine you're a painter and you're like, I want to paint that. And so in order to paint that, you really have to inspect, like, oh, there's trees, oh, there's people, oh, what color is that? And so you're looking at the scene, and then you're like, understanding how to interpret that through your art or through your paintbrush. And as musicians, like, there's a way to explore music, which is just like, I'm gonna do things that sound good. And then there's another way to explore music, which is like, I wanna express music. I wanna express like other things that I feel in life through music. And that is like edgy sometimes. It's like hard to know how to associate that type of playing. But this is like one way to get to do that, is like, I wanna express support, right? That sounds like, I feel like solid on that if I play that, right? Like, or I want to express like variety, you know? So I'm just inviting like a different way of thinking about it, not because you have to do it, but more just because it's different.
Right.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is having an idea before that you bring into the exploration, rather than exploring to see what ideas come out.
Thank you. That's exactly what it is.
It would be cool to like see a list of possibilities.
Okay, wait, like, let's bring it to the context of what he said is exactly right. And it reminds me of, like, we all go around circle and say our word, right? For the night. So we want our night to, like, we have an intention for the night. That doesn't mean the night's going to go like that. It doesn't mean it has to be about that. But it's just sort of like a way to engage ourselves. And so, like, for that, yeah, it could be helpful to have like a list of words that I could choose from.
Just like as the, like, in creating the vocabulary.
Yeah.
You know?
And totally. And I could give you like my list. And I also want to make it clear that I don't think that like I don't think that my list is like the best list,
yeah,
you know?
Sure.
It's really about like developing your own way of expressing music.
Right. Good, just to, when we're listening to songs on the radio, just like, what words do those songs evoke, and then explore why.
Exactly. And then like explore how, so if there's something that peeks out to you, like if there's a song that evokes like watery, for instance, is like, I think a lot of us can resonate with, like, we hear music and it sounds watery. Like, we all have like a different association of what that means. And then to come to the guitar and be like, I want to play watery. Like, what would that sound like? That's a really good exercise and a way to start engaging in this way without having to know anything. Like, you do it just with open strings. Like, what is watery with open strings? Like, what would water do? Like, my first instinct, that kind of thing. Like, really like circular. Like, I'm just kind of rubbing the strings because water is like, doesn't have a shape, and I don't have to even play notes for that, but I can if I want to. Water, to me, water changes notes one by one. And so it's simple concepts like that. Like, water changes notes one by one. That's like what I'm deciding right now. It doesn't mean it's true.
What's true for you in this moment?
In this moment, exactly. And so, so that's kind of what I'm inviting.
Nice. That feels like a nice way to start listening to music now. Like, to start creating that list of vocabulary. And I have the same thing with you. Like, I had a percussionist come in last night to the studio and was like, I didn't know how to communicate what I wanted him to do. So without that, like, it's almost like the textures of music, the textures and all the different senses can come into music too. It's like, how do you express that if you haven't like understood, well, when I'm hearing this song, I'm feeling water or fire or air or earth or, flowing or staccato, obviously.
Or even like different types of associations, like tasty, or like sour, or painful, or longing, or emotions. Like, there are so many different ways to identify like the reactions that we get from certain sounds.
Sure.
Yeah, and I don't, and there are the musical terms, and they're cool to learn, but like, they don't have to be the way that you understand or communicate music. Especially if you have your own language. Like, if you develop, like, sour is and this is actually a game I used to play with myself, where I would play one note, and sometimes I would play it within a scale. Like we talked about earlier, like playing with the metronome on 20 and just playing one note. So like within that context, I would get, so I was telling them about a practice I used to do where I would put the metronome on super slow and just try to play whole notes on one note. And this was like my morning practice, an hour every day, like just wake up and do it. And it was really satisfying. And of course, an hour every day is playing one note is hypnotizing, right? It's like, and also it's very easy to get distracted. So I would have to like find ways to engage. One of the ways I did that would be like, can I play more purple? Then I'd like really like try to play purple. Or like, can I play like airplane flying through the sky? I would like try to evoke these different things, like whether they're images or emotions, colors, numbers. 7. What's 7? What's 7 in like this one note, and that helped me like create more intention in soloing, because like I would go to play a solo and be like, I want to play more 7, and that might come out as like a mathematical, like, well, I'm playing the septuplet, or it might come out like, well, 7's kind of like this odd but like circular number, and like, or maybe the shape of 7, and that gives you like a richer, deeper expression when you go to play, I think. And it also gives you like a more fun, awesome experience.
And it also helps you see that you don't have to be super fast and play a ton of notes to improvise well.
Oh, totally. I am a fond believer of not having, like, there are no prerequisites to improvising well. Like, in fact, intention is the only thing that really matters to me. If you play a note that sounds horrible to everyone else, but like you love it and that's the note you're playing and you're fucking choosing to play it, like that comes through. Yeah.
I meant to play that.
I mean, have you guys heard the band The Shags? Has anyone?
No.
Okay. So no. You guys need to hear the band The Shags.
Oh, we do, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I won't play it for you now. I mean, maybe after we'll play it. But they're this band of children. It's kind of a weird story, actually. Their parents like made them. They like locked them in the basement and like gave them instruments. And they're like, start a band. And they were like totally like sheltered and isolated, which is very weird. But they came, and the other part of that is they didn't listen to any music. They had no teachers, they had no references, no influences. And so they were just given drums, guitar, bass, and they sang, and they were given a 4-track recorder, and their parents were just like, okay, just like start playing with no guidance. And they
How old were they at the time?
They were like maybe middle schoolers. And they came
But
up,
they had heard music before then.
maybe like, but the story is that their parents weren't like particularly musical or anything. They just like wanted their kids to play music. So they heard stuff on the radio or whatever, but they weren't like particularly like musically inclined.
Yeah.
And so they started making all these albums and like, it's crazy. Like the stuff that came out of them, like they're so, I would really, I'm going to play it for you guys. At least one song when we're done, because it's just so like out of this world. Like the rhythm is not right and da-da-da, but there's something like very hypnotizing about it, because there's like so much intention behind it, and like you could tell they worked so hard to make these arrangements, even though they sound like they're almost like they're like confusing, really, is what they are. It's like, what's going on? but there's like some like very like deep essence of like they like put their heart and soul into it.
It's like, Father, I hate you. Get me out of here.
They're actually very positive messages. Like one of them is a Halloween song, and it's like, it's Halloween, it's Halloween. Like they're all like really like kiddish, you know. But anyway, The Shags. Any questions so far? At all? Cool. Let's see. How are you guys feeling about like? Is anyone like feeling like at capacity? Like this is good, or do you like more? You want more ideas, more things to practice? Are you fulfilled? Are you bored? Let's have a check-in.
I feel more curious to see what could you propose then anything that I could ask? I feel
Okay.
considering that it's like a collective class and it's not like we have these, you know.
Right. Yeah.
I'm more interested in like
Just open to
yeah.
whatever else. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what else. Brad, I haven't heard from you in a while.
That's true. Oh, I've been playing along with songs, just practicing soloing. So I feel like from tonight, get into like, okay, what key is going on here? Maybe what chords are going on?
Yeah.
Because I haven't been approaching it with keys and chords or any of that.
Right.
Just like following my ear and getting into like as sincere expression as possible with playing.
Yeah.
So I've been way more on the emotional side than the technical theory side. So I'm going to attempt to bring some numbers and letters into the whole thing.
Yeah, and also I want to just make it clear, like theory and technical side doesn't contradict with emotional feeling side. It's only a communication method. So, you know, like for instance, we have words for our emotions, and that just helps us like communicate with our friends. And that's I think like a healthy way to approach the theory stuff. Like it's not meant to make you feel like stupid for not knowing it, you know. It's really meant to just be like a way for us to communicate and a way for you really to communicate with your instrument more. The instrument's just like, hey, like I have these functions that have worked for centuries.
Mm-hmm.
Like just say it, I have them, you know. Like you don't have to, like you have access to them is all it is. So yeah, so as you approach the songs and as like maybe a good thing for you, since you have been taking the practice by ear and like more from the feeling side, maybe a fun thing would be to like get a little bit into the analytical mode, but analyzing the feelings. So if there's a song that makes you like, this song is like conjures up a lot of longing inside of me. What does that sound? Oh, it's like this particular chord. And then maybe there's like another song that reminds you of that song. And you're like, I wonder if it's the same chord. So you're like playing like detective with your feelings and with the way you associate with music. And that doesn't necessarily mean you have to like identify like the technical numbers and letters of everything. It just means like, yeah, like trying to find patterns in your likes and dislikes and that kind of thing.
It would be helpful to be able to communicate with people like that. Because I could say, I want to, next song is ancestral lineage healing. You know, like in that key.
Yeah.
You know, like, okay. Good luck.
Good luck, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's good.
Right. Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah. Do you have anything to say? Or any like
I was wondering if you guys had come up with patterns for the A minor and G thing, like me and
oh yeah, that's right. We didn't finish that off.
Yeah, I was playing with the rhythm a little bit more than the notes, like trying to maybe break it and like put the silence in at some point during the night instead of like having noise all the time. Sound. Yeah.
Nice, like rhythmic ideas.
Mm.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
always an awesome available option, even if it's just like on one note. Do you have any?
I was,
ideas?
you know, I've been playing with strumming and then just picking out, like having a couple voices. Like there's the main voice of the chord, and then like picking out certain notes.
Mm-hmm. Oh, like identifying notes that like you would want to stand out.
Yeah.
Cool.
And then playing with those notes or bending them and things like that. So
Yeah.
like in a vocal accompaniment.
Great.
Through the solo.
Yeah. One of my very first like I would say like teaching in how to improvise. I remember the first time I was like asking, and I was interested in jazz at the time, and I was like, how do you know how to play over the chords? It wasn't my main teacher, but just a teacher I had before who was like, you just play the notes that are in the chords.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh my God. Like it just made so much sense because I was like, let's say it's A minor and G. It's like, I'm like, oh yeah, any one of these notes are going to sound good on my A minor. And so that, like, kind of what you're talking about, like, you can take the notes that you're already playing and then just start, like, engaging with them in a more expressive way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's an awesome exploration.
It's a safe place.
It is totally
Deep
a safe
water.
place. And that, yeah, the safe place thing is big. It's like, and I do feel safe with, like, knowing what key I'm in and stuff like that, because that is the safety for me. That is, like, the cushy, like, okay, I can rely on that, and then I can, you know, venture off. But, like, I always have my home base, you know? Can always go back to base camp when I get scared. Yeah. Yeah. Let's try another thing. Let's just do another, like, improv game. And this time we're gonna play A minor and G. Maybe one of us will hold down the chords, or we can, like, switch holding down the chords, and others of us will try to play, like, non-chordal parts. So, like, just finding, I'll give you a couple of examples. Can you play the chords for me? So I'm just gonna try to play, like, a guitar part that's, like, repetitive, that's just gonna sound cool and embellish what she's playing. So maybe I'm like, so that's my part, right? And another example might be, like, maybe I want to do a bass part. Right? Another example, just give me one more. Like, kind of a middle part. So more like a rhythmic kind of middle-y part. So just to give you, like, all the options, and there are many more options too. And using our ears, it doesn't have to be anything complex. It could be, like, one note at a time. Like, maybe, you know, your part could just finding that open note that works for both of the chords. And maybe your, like, idea is, like, maybe it's like a, and you can even, so you're just kind of, like, finding notes that work, but there's some intentional concept. So in that one, the intentional concept was, like, I'm sticking to this rhythm. You know, I'm sticking to this little, like, ding-a-ding-ding-ding, even though I'm changing notes. So there's some intentionality to what you're playing. So we're going to try this little game, improv game, where one of us is going to hold down the chords. I can hold down the chords. And we're all going to try to find, like, repetitive parts. And I just gave a whole bunch of examples, but to give you the options, like, you can do, like, high, like, melodic parts, or you can do, like, chordal parts, or you can do bass parts, or you can do rhythmic parts, or sparse parts, or, like, very
But we're finding
dense
one
parts.
part that we hold, and the idea is that we create something that sounds good together.
Yeah, exactly. You're just listening and being like, what does the texture need? We're all creating a texture together, is what we're gonna do. And then what I'm going to, I'll play the chords for this one. When you have your texture, let's see, is there a bodily symbol that we can do? Okay, when you have your texture, puff up your cheeks. Okay, and once we have all our cheeks puffed up, then we're gonna play with, like, dropping out parts and coming back in and just seeing how the texture transforms.
Okay.
So, but let's first get to our part. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay. Everyone remember their part? Okay. You can unplug your cheeks. Okay. So I want to hear all the parts together without me playing the chords. Can we try that?
Mhm.
1, 2, 3, 4. Great. Cool. So now, when I point to you, it's stop playing, and if I point to you again, it's start playing. So same part, you know, and you can, of course, you can like improvise within the part, but same concept, kind of like what we're talking about, whatever your concept that you chose is. Okay? Let's try. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Everyone.
Everyone starts.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. 1, 2, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, guys.
Cool.
Yeah.
No, that's good.
Yeah. Another. Yeah. So we're gonna be finishing up, but one thing that I want to do, like as we continue, is these improv games. Like another way to, as we get more familiar with like different ways to improv with each other, we can start to play games like, okay, we're gonna stick to an idea, and now we're all gonna like change an idea at the same time spontaneously, and then stick to that idea. So we want to get better at like finding ideas that we feel good sticking to for a little while, and that'll be a really great way to like yeah, okay, wait, this is important. That'll be a really great way to learn how we, as we are as musicians, to engage with the music in the most beautiful way, right? Because if you have to switch to a new idea right now and you have to stick to that, then you better choose something you know is going to sound good. And that means like you're finding your limits and you're finding your limitations, but you're also like embracing and loving like the things that you love about music. So you're like, yeah, there's something like really edgy and nice about like, I'm going to choose something that I know is good, but also that I know that I'm going to like for a little while because I have to play it. So there are little ways to engage with improvisation that would be great to like continue doing as we move forward. Yeah. So I don't have any like last or any reflections on that particular exercise that we did.
It was cool hearing when the parts dropped out how, you know, something felt missing.
Yeah.
It was okay to change the texture, but it was like, no, I want you back. Or I want you back.
Totally. It was always like a sweetness when the person came back in, right? Yeah. And it's also like a beautiful exercise in listening, is like really understanding what everyone's contribution is. And so like this is a listening awareness that we want to have when we're playing all the time, is like, how exactly is everybody contributing, you know?
Yeah, and it was nice how different everything we came up with was. Very different, and yet it all fit together in a really beautiful way.
Totally. Yeah, exactly. We're all like doing our part.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, we should create a song from that.
Yeah.
We
We just did.
It's on the video.
Yeah.
Number 7.
Yeah.
Number 7.
Number 7.
Number 7.
Nice. Number 7. Cool. Well, does anyone have any questions, like last minute questions before we finish up? Or?
We have homework.
So this isn't, yes and no. Like this isn't so much a place where we can structure like homework for everybody. But one thing that I'm inviting.
Well, yeah, you can. The labeling, the coming up with a language for the music, you know, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but what I mean to say is that some things are going to be more relevant and interesting to some people, whereas other things are going to be more relevant and interesting to others. And I want to like really honor that. And I want this to be a space where like lots of different things can be explored and not everything is required. So, so for instance, like those really interested in like technical stuff, there's the scale positions that I've been posting, and I'm going to continue to post that I feel like are really important to practice for if you're into that. And then there's like the other thing that I'm really wanting to invite is all of us to start conversations around songs that we hear and have some sort of reaction to or question about. So maybe it's like a key thing, like maybe like we were talking about earlier, like how do you identify a key in a certain song? So maybe you're listening to a song and you're like, is this a key change or is this just sounding weird? Or like, how do I improvise on this? And I would really love if you guys would, you know, if anything like that comes up to like, you know, on the Patreon page, there's a little community spot. If you could just post there so that more people could get involved in the process, because, you know, I could talk about these things for days, but the way that I became familiar with these things is like really like engaging with music. And so like to start the discussion with like other examples and stuff is going to be really helpful, I think, for all of us to have like support in that too. So that's a good homework. It's just like analytical listening, inquisitive listening, you know. And then another type of homework would be like seeing if you could expand your playing patterns by using like other influences to express music, right? So rather than like, I want to learn a different chord, it's like, no, I want to learn how to play this chord, but with a different kind of intention. Like, yeah. So.
Nice.
Yeah.
And feel free to say no, but once people finish with their questions, and taking advantage that both of you are here, maybe we could end with an easy, nice, sweet song to sing.
And you want to play all the song together, you mean? Or
if we can, yeah. Or I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was fine.
What song? What song? What are you talking about today?
Well, En el Cielo would be really easy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's not called Pachamama.
Yeah. I know. I have to change. I have to like tell a million people that now.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can do that since we've been
you know
playing those chords.
Yeah, I can follow.
It's the same chords.
Yeah. And if it's A minor and G.
A minor, E minor, G.
And E minor and G.
Yeah.
And since you guys are all here, like feel free to like come up with different things that aren't necessarily playing the chords, you know, like come up with different parts.
Oh, I want to learn how to tune by ear.
Why?
So I'm not doing this and
Just tune by ear more
Well, you
often.
still have to do that.
I mean, do you know the like pattern for tuning?
yeah. Oh, and I also want to learn
Oh, the harmonics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just do that.
I was like, wow.
You don't need vocabulary.
Yeah. It's true. It's harder to hear the harmonics on nylon strings than it is on steel strings. But in general, it's 5th and 7th fret.
I know I've never been able to figure out how to do it.
So it's it's the fret, it's the bar above the 5th fret, and you just touch it. So right over the bar, and just touch it like watch. I'm not even pressing. Just yeah.
Oh,
You got it.
it just sounds nice around here.
Yeah, because of the steel strings. Make sure it's right over the bar, and then
Just
as
really
you pluck it,
super soft.
and as you pluck it, let go with the left hand. Yeah, like you're
Okay, I just
launching
need
it.
to practice that. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
What are the lyrics? Is it like easy?
No.
The chorus is.
Okay.
Well, maybe something that's easy to sing.
You're the songstress.
I mean,
Yeah. What's a good easy one?
Altar of Love.
Yeah, you know
That has a handful of chords though, but it's repetitive.
one.
And what about that one? Maybe the two
I think
sacred.
you have one in your head.
Yeah. Maybe it's too much a sacred song, but that one. Come.
Oh,
That's a beautiful one.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, we could play that.
Do you guys want to
Pretty
just?
easy, I think. All the chords.
It's a lot of chords.
It's a lot of chords.
Yeah.
Well, let's see.
But you can noodle.
You can noodle. Yeah.
Hmm.
Let's noodle.
Okay.
Yeah, let's do that.
What are the chords?
G, A minor to E, to A minor, to F, to G, A minor to E, minor to E, then D minor to G. Yeah. To C. To D7.
Oh.
To F. I mean, you picked kind of the complicated one, G. Or you can just noodle.
Yeah. But the key
Or
of
you can just sing, because I think that's
Yeah, let's just sing.
the key
Yeah.
of
the key of A minor.
No. Yeah. No, it's the key of C. Well, yeah, it's the key of
Yeah.
A.
A minor, but we're thinking C.
Except when it goes to D7. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And D7. Yeah.
Come wherever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of living in. Come wherever you are. This isn't a caravan of despair. It doesn't matter if you've broken your vows 1,000 times before, and yet again. Come again, come, and yet again, come. Come whoever you are. Wanderers, worshippers, lovers of leaving and come. Come wherever you are. This isn't a caravan of despair. It doesn't matter if you've broken your vows 1,000 times before, and This isn't a caravan of despair. It doesn't matter if you've broken your vows 1,000 times before, and yet again. Come again, come, and yet again, come. Come again, come, and yet again, come. Come again, come, and yet again, come.
Look at this. Should have been another note there. No, in here.
It doesn't matter if you've broken your vows 1,000 times before, and yet again. Come again, come, and yet again, come. Come again, come, and yet again, come. Come again, come, and yet again, come.
Is that the title of that song?
Come again. Mhm.
Did you write it?
No, it's by Sudananda, but the poem is Rumi.
Okay.
Yeah,
Pretty song.
it's beautiful.
Yeah. Too difficult though.
Is it easy to find the chords online?
Lauren's songbook
Yeah.
has
It's in
it.
a songbook.
In your song?
I have a songbook.
Holy shit.
Yeah, and you know what? If you want, I can. Oh, look, I've kind of been in here. Woo, 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 woo. I can
Fine.
take a picture. I can take a picture on my phone and send it to you if you want.
Just the